Welcome to the Prison Rape Elimination Act Program Performance Measures Training. Today we will talk about understanding your program data, how to prepare, how to collect, how to track, and how to report on program data. Understanding and reporting useful and accurate data is a critical component in the solicitation and award process and can help both yourself and your program manager gain key insights on many decision-making factors, whether those factors be related to time, resources, or funding. OJJDP uses performance data to not only understand the agency's story, but also to demonstrate outcome-based results. In this training session, we will go over the revised performance measures. And we will discuss collecting and sharing information to help all of us better understand how well the Prison Rape Elimination Act program is operating on the ground. To make this session as interactive as possible, please use the WebEx chat to respond to any question that you see on the screen. So, for example, we have a question here on the screen, and this question helps us better understand you and your needs around collecting, tracking, and/or reporting data. What is your biggest issue with collecting, tracking, and/or reporting data? Melissa is posting coordinating across different data systems that do not connect. Latasha has posted depending on data outside of my control to be consistent and accurate. Cassandra has posted organizing data. Cassandra has posted following the guidelines. Okay, we'll continue on then. Thank you, everyone. The agenda for today includes the following program overview: performance measures, collecting and tracking data and best practices, reporting data and best practices, as well as reporting in a pandemic and what to do with personally identifiable information will be presented. Lastly, we will review key documents and resources. As we progress through the training, all website links mentioned during the training will be presented to you in chat and also provided to you in your copy of this presentation that will be emailed to you later this week. The objectives for today include understanding what the performance measure updates are for your program and understanding the need for a data collection plan for the data you collect between July 2021 and December 2021, reporting in January of 2022. Further, you will gain understanding of the performance measures reporting due dates. The deadlines, as you know, happen twice a year, July 30th and January 30th. And lastly, you will understand where to find supporting resources. Now, in the showcase sessions we conducted last April, we talked about the newly updated performance measures as outlined in your solicitation or award and located at the OJJDP.ojp.gov website. This training is being presented to you to emphasize the fact that now is the time to start planning, collecting, and tracking data for the July through December 2021 reporting cycle with the goal of reporting in January 2022 on these newly revised program measures. I'd like to pass the microphone to Ro Dewan, who will go over the program and the performance measures with you. Ro?
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello and good morning, everybody. In the Intervention Division, we have several state-run programs. The program we are talking about today is the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA program, as part of the OJJDP State Program Division. The PREA program aims to prevent youth sexual assault occurring in confinement facilities and implement and maintain national standards promoting a zero-tolerance culture against youth sexual assault in correctional facilities. To give some background, the Prison Rape Elimination Act of 2003, or PREA, was signed into law on September 4, 2003, and became the first federal legislation to address sexual assault in the corrections setting. The goal of PREA is to eradicate sexual misconduct by residents and staff in all types of correctional facilities in the United States. On May 12, 2012, as required by the Act, the Department of Justice released the final rule to prevent, detect, and respond to prison rape. This landmark rule is the first ever federal effort to set national standards aimed at protecting inmates from sexual abuse in confinement facilities at the federal, state, and local levels. These national standards apply to 4 categories of facilities: adult prisons and jails, lockups, community confinement facilities, and juvenile facilities. The OJJDP works with states and territories to ensure their compliance with PREA and to protect youth in juvenile facilities. Through OJJDP's Title II Formula Grant Program, funding is provided to states to support their efforts to prevent delinquency, improve the juvenile justice system, and protect youth from harm, wherein each year state governors must annually certify that their states are in compliance with PREA standards. We will touch more on this later. In defining the program goals, goal number 1 here is for youth to be free from sexual victimization in confinement facilities. The accompanying objectives and the results and outcomes sought in order to accomplish this goal are as displayed on this slide. The main objectives are to support states to implement evidence-based or promising victimization prevention and intervention strategies in juvenile facilities, provide resources and training and technical assistance, and support state planning and system improvement efforts to implement policy and practice changes based on the national standards. By achieving these objectives, the desired results and outcomes are an increase in youth free from sexual victimization in confinement facilities, an increase in states in compliance with the Prison Rape Elimination Act standards, and an increase in state and local facilities in compliance with the national standards. Now, let's remind ourselves of the performance measures process and then discuss the newly updated performance measures found in the PREA program. As you review these with us, please note that these are the newly revised performance measures, but you will recognize some of them, since not all of them were changed. The framework or logic model used to write the performance measures includes 4 components: inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes. Inputs are program resources such as grant funding and award administration. Activities are actions that convert inputs to outputs and can be anything from identifying key personnel with access to crime and alcohol abuse data to establishing information sharing agreements. Outputs are products or services that are the result of activities such as trainings, meetings, etc. Outcome measures speak to the longer-term program goals. The newly updated performance measures will require changes in the way you collect data, and that's why we're here today, to ensure you understand that you will be reporting on the newly updated performance measures in the July through December 2021 timeframe come January 30th, 2022, and that you have a plan in place to do so. The performance measures document the progress you have made in accomplishing program goals and objectives by collecting data on grantee activities and services. Remember, regular reporting on performance measures outcomes establishes your program's growth. You can find your program's performance measures at the online location listed at the bottom of the slide. As Rebecca mentioned, this presentation will be sent to you via email in a couple of days after this session, so you will also have access to this link. Let's briefly discuss this program in more detail from a high level. What performance measures do grantees report on? Some examples of performance measures that grantees report on include technical and training assistance, collaboration, protective factors, productive lives, prevention and intervention, program quality, child welfare, and victimization measures. What is different about this program that makes it unique? as we stated earlier, governors certify each year that their states are in compliance with the PREA standards, or provide assurance that not less than 5% of funding shall be used to achieve compliance, or request that funds be held in abeyance. If the state fails to comply with the PREA requirements, in this case, OJJDP actually assesses a 5% penalty against formula grant funding from Title II each year a state or territory fails to comply with PREA requirements, wherein the funds that are collected from this penalty from the non-compliant state are then distributed back to all states and territories that have submitted the required certification or assurances based on the juvenile population. Who are the grant funds intended to help? This program is intended to provide support for states to outline steps to prevent sexual abuse and harassment of youth in confinement. States' compliance with the PREA standards also help to provide information services for victims in these facilities and procedures for conducting investigations, training staff, and being compliant with audits. Now, let's go over the performance measures by category. OJJDP identified and organized newly updated performance measures to include 3 different categories. The categories include overall measures, multi-program measures, and program-specific measures. In overall measures, grantees will be asked the same overall questions in every program. This allows analysts to aggregate data across multiple programs and assist with responding to ad hoc data requests. Multi-program measures impact 3 different types of populations. The first type are shared targeted populations, that is, children involved in the child welfare system, as well as tribal youth. The second type of population impacted by multi-program measures include those with a similar service delivery model, such as mental health services and prevention services. And lastly, the third type of population impacted by multi-program measures includes those with shared outcomes, such as youth provided with defense counsel. Lastly, program-specific measures collect data that align with a specific population, funded activity, or desired result. These measures help reflect the unique outputs and outcomes for each specific program and distinguishes them from other programs. Program-specific measures also help track the progress of individual programs over time. Next, let's look at selected performance measures. Although we may not be able to go through all of them, I wanted to highlight those that I thought may prompt questions over the next 6-month reporting cycle and continuing through the life of the award. In the category of overall measures, under training and technical assistance, in one such selected performance measure, you will report on the number of training events held, wherein the grantee is to provide the reporting criteria as shown by the alphabetic categories under performance measures in the right-hand side column, which include A, the number of training requests received, and B, the number of training events held. By providing this information, the performance measure can track whether the training is keeping pace with demand. We see that the terminology is broken down further in the definitions column, wherein training refers to accessible in-person or virtual teaching and learning activities, including planning, curriculum development, and delivery, aimed to help individuals apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes needed by a task, job, or organization. Training events are planned activities that are delivered to help individuals apply knowledge, skills, and attitudes needed by a task, job, or organization. Training events include both train the trainer and training of individuals type of events. Training requests are any formal or informal inquiries for learning activities, curriculum development, and delivery for a group of individuals or organizations. Next, we look at another performance measure in the category of overall measures. In this measure is the number of individuals trained by population, and for reporting, the grantee reports the number of individuals trained as well as the specific population trained. This way, for each training event, as indicated in the definition, the grantee can list the number of individuals trained by the population trained. The next overall OJJDP measure that we discussed for the PREA program is the percentage of technical assistance requests delivered. For this measure, the grantee reports the number of technical assistance requests accepted and B, the number of technical assistance requests delivered by type. Through this given information, letters A and B, the performance measure of the percentage of technical assistance requests delivered is then calculated. To break down the terminology in the definitions column, technical assistance refers to development, dissemination, and delivery of specialized knowledge or expertise to an organization or group of individuals to address a problem for the purpose of informing policy, procedure, or practice. The next performance measure we discuss in the category of overall measures is the number of individuals who experience a victimization. Grantees report A, the number of individuals who experienced a first-time victimization, and B, the number of individuals who experienced a subsequent victimization. To break down the terminology in the definitions column, victimization is defined as an individual impacted by either a violent or nonviolent event directly or as a witness. A subsequent victimization includes an individual who experienced a new unrelated victimization or a new victimization similar in nature or circumstances to their first victimization. The next performance measure we discuss in the category of overall measures is the percentage of training participants who reported they applied training, knowledge, or skills within 3 months of attending a training. This performance measure is calculated using the grantee reported figure as indicated in the right-hand side column of the number of individuals who reported they used the knowledge or skills learned at a training event within 3 months of attending the training. As included in the definition column, this figure is determined by a post-training survey. The next performance measure we discuss in the overall measure category is an outcome measure, which is the percentage of organizations who employed a new evidence-based or promising service, policy, or practice recommended by a technical assistance provider. This outcome is based on, as defined, the number of organizations who reported employing a new evidence-based or promising service, policy, or practice as a result of receiving technical assistance. To capture the outcome properly, the grantee must report, as we see in the right-hand side column, A, the number of organizations that received technical assistance, B, the number of organizations that employed a new evidence-based or promising service, policy, or practice after receiving technical assistance, and C, the number of organizations that employed a new service, policy, or practice after receiving technical assistance. From this reported information, the outcome of the percentage of organizations who employed a new evidence-based or promising service, policy, or practice recommended by a technical assistance provider can be determined. We now move on to discuss a couple of performance measures in the multi-program measures category concerning system improvement. In the performance measure shown on this slide, as shown in the right-hand side column, the grantee reports A, the total number of new policies employed, and B, the number of new policies adhered to evidence-based practices. From this grantee reported information, the outcome measure of the percentage of new policies adhered to evidence-based practices is calculated. Here, to break down the terminology a bit further, as shown in the definitions column, a practice is defined as evidence-based when meta-analyses of experimental or quasi-experimental designs assess the average effectiveness of the practice on various outcomes across several studies. The practice must have the highest quality of evidence with a statistically significant average effect size favoring the practice. A practice is a general category of programs, strategies, or procedures that share similar characteristics about the issues they address and how they address them. A single evidence rating is given for each outcome affected by the practice. The practice profile can answer, does mentoring usually achieve its goals? We now move on to discuss another performance measure in the category of multi-program measures concerning system improvement, which is the percentage of new policies that adopted evidence-based practices. Here, the grantee reports A, the number of new policies that have adopted evidence-based practices, and from this grantee reported figure, the percentage of new policies adopted to evidence-based practices is calculated. As shown in the definitions column, a practice is defined as we just discussed on the previous slide. A policy is a definite course or method of action selected from among alternatives and in light of given conditions to guide and determine present and future decisions. And to adapt means to make suitable to requirements or conditions, to adjust or modify. We now discuss an example performance measure in the category of program-specific measures, which is the percentage of juvenile facilities, such as resident and secure juvenile facilities, in state in compliance with PREA standards. To determine this measure, the grantee reports, as shown in the right-hand side column, A, the number of juvenile facilities in state, and B, the number of juvenile facilities in state in compliance with PREA standards. From this reported information, the outcome of the percentage of juvenile facilities in state in compliance with the PREA standards can be determined. To break down the terminology in the definitions column, juvenile means any person under the age of 18 unless under adult court supervision and confined or detained in a prison or jail. Juvenile facility means a facility primarily used for the confinement of juveniles pursuant to the juvenile justice system or criminal justice system. Resident means any person confined or detained in a juvenile facility or in a community confinement facility. Secure juvenile facility means a juvenile facility in which the movements and activities of individual residents may be restricted or subject to control through the use of physical barriers or intensive staff supervision. The Prison Rape Elimination Act standards, or PREA standards, as we discussed earlier, were laid down by the Act. These standards outline steps to prevent sexual abuse and harassment of youth in confinement. The standards also include information on services for victims and procedures for facilities to conduct investigations, train staff, and be compliant with audits. We now discuss a final example performance measure in the category of program-specific measures concerning system improvement. This measure is the percentage of new policies adhered to PREA standards. To determine this measure, the grantee reports, as shown on the right-hand side column, A, the number of new policies employed, and B, the number of new policies adhered to PREA standards. After the grantee reports this information using these two figures, the outcome of the percentage of new policies adhered to PREA standards can be calculated. To break down the terminology in the definitions column, a policy, as we saw earlier, is a definite course or method of action selected from among alternatives and in light of given conditions to guide and determine present and future decisions. The PREA standards, as we just discussed, were laid down by the Act and outline steps to prevent sexual abuse and harassment of youth in confinement. Now, I would like to pass the mic back to Rebecca, who will conduct an activity to check your understanding.
Thank you, Ro. Appreciate you taking us through the performance measures. We have a check for understanding for you. And so we've just gone through those performance measures, and we have Brenda Sukup. She is a Prison Rape Elimination Act awardee, and she's just received these newly updated performance measures to include the definitions and questions. She's attended this learning event, and she's sitting at her desk wondering how to get started. What would you recommend that Ms. Sokup do to prepare and begin data collection in the July to December 2021 reporting cycle? If you'd respond in chat, please do so now. Grantees have noted that it's important to go over the performance measures closely to determine who is responsible for capturing and tracking the data, and determine who is responsible for reporting the data, set up some sort of time frame or cycle of reporting so that everyone has the same calendar. Now that's what Brenda can do. Brenda also needs to be aware of the reporting process. I mentioned the cycle. Those FY20 grantees will continue to report on and submit narrative questions in JustGrants during the July submission period. And FY20 grantees plus any FY19 and prior grantees whose awards have not yet ended will report on the newly revised performance measures beginning January 2022. We're going to review several best practices while collecting and tracking data. Creating a data collection plan requires a good deal of pre-planning and preparation. When creating a data collection plan, best practices often include locating the performance measures, understanding what each question is asking, and determining the value or data type of the answer. And even if that answer is a 0, determining what data type that response will be. Creating a plan to identify when and how to collect the data, setting up that time frame and getting on everyone's calendars. And for example, what type of tool or instrument will you use to collect the needed data? Has this tool or instrument been validated and or used before? How accurate is this tool or instrument? And who will collect the data and use the instrument? There are several best practices you can implement when collecting good data. You want to be proactive in your approach. You want to designate staff for the coordination of the performance measure data collection process. You want to review progress reporting questionnaires before entering data. You want to ensure that designated staff participate in trainings. You want to pay attention to communication from JustGrants. And lastly, if applicable, you want to review, edit, and validate data with subgrantees before submission. Some things to think about as you plan to collect and track data include timelines and resources. The grantee and a subgrantee relationship. You are required to enter data on all performance measures that relate to activities described in your approved OJJDP grant application and carried out with OJJDP funding. As a grantee, you should plan to collect data on behalf of all of your sub-recipients. Tracking and maintaining your data. Some of the questions that you may want to consider while planning include duration of data collection and document version control. Does your plan include a beginning, a middle, and an ending date? How will you manage documents over this time period? For example, will you track them using an Excel spreadsheet? Regarding location and access, how long will you store the data? Who will have access to it? And if it is stored on a shared drive, who is given permissions and by whom? Lastly, how will changes be communicated? How will the data be validated and edited if applicable? We will now review several best practices during reporting. In the January 2022 reporting cycle, you will be reporting on the newly revised performance measures and crafting the narrative. Narrative questions provide you with the opportunity to answer or address these topics. What do the numbers you reported on in your performance measures actually mean on the ground? How does your work impact your community? You want to use the narrative to walk the reader from the numeric output to the tangible outcome. And you want to use specific and detailed examples to make your point. Other things to think about including in your narrative could be providing evidence to support your conclusions, thinking about what funding has allowed you to do that you could not do prior to receiving this funding, and could include words like COVID-19 and pandemic when explaining COVID-19 adjustments to the program. On the screen, you see an example of a narrative. Next, let's discuss best practices for reporting in JustGrants. Common issues arise since you are required to respond to every question. When reporting zeros, if a measure does not apply, you enter a 0 value and then you add an explanation by selecting the comments field. A brief description, such as we are still in our planning period or there was no activity during the reporting cycle, are acceptable responses in JustGrants. Avoiding duplication and count can also be challenging. Having more than one person review the data, for example, a program manager, can help ensure duplicate data does not exist in your reporting. And, as you know, reporting is awards-based. Another best practice for those of you with multiple awards when trying not to duplicate data is to spend down funds and create a final report of activities you performed for the oldest award first before beginning to enter data and reporting on another award. If this is not possible, prorate your quantitative data according to the amount of each award, again, for those of you with multiple awards. You want to contact JustGrants with any concerns related to error messages found in JustGrants. You can save your data and you can resume data entry at a later point in time in JustGrants. And for more information like this about JustGrants, please visit the YouTube video using the link provided on the screen and posted in chat. Also, you may want to contact the PMT Helpdesk for any questions related to progress reporting or reporting on the newly updated measures. You are encouraged to reach out to your program manager with questions or concerns. Now, as mentioned previously, some grantees have multiple awards. A service should be reported under one program or the other. The same service cannot be reported under multiple programs. If you have difficulty tracking services for each specific award, you want to work with OJJDP program managers to identify an appropriate method for prorating all services to allocate numbers to each award. You'll be reporting on the activities that occurred between July and December 2021 in January of 2022. Discretionary and other awards reporting deadlines are July 30th for the reporting period January 1st through June 30th, and January 30th for the reporting period July 1st through December 31st. More information regarding reporting in JustGrants will be forthcoming. Reporting on the new measures. If you are a 2019 and earlier grantee, this training is not directed at you, but you are welcome to stay to learn more about the new measures. Regarding the 2020 and future grantees, even though JustGrants does not yet have the functionality to accept data for the new measures, these trainings are being conducted to ensure that you begin tracking data in support of the new measures. Doing so ensures that you can report on your program data once the system functionality is available. Lastly, no modifications are being made to the existing measures in the PMT system as it will be sunsetting eventually. Collecting and tracking data that contains personally identifiable information should be done with considerations towards the Privacy Act of 1974 and according to guidance issued by NIST 800-122. Broadly stated, the purpose of the Privacy Act is to balance the government's need to maintain information about individuals with the rights of the individual to be protected against unwarranted invasion of their privacy. In accordance with this act, you want to collect data, only the data that you need. If you are using printed materials, keep sensitive PII in locked desk drawers, file cabinets, or similar locked enclosures. And when using sensitive PII, you want to keep it in an area where access is controlled and limited to persons with an official need to know. Reporting in a pandemic. You should complete progress reporting to the best of your ability and submit it before the deadline. Every progress report form includes a narrative field or multiple narrative fields where you can provide additional information about the data that you are entering. You want to use those narrative fields to explain any incomplete or missing data. You are encouraged to use the narrative field that asks for additional information about effectiveness, for example, to describe COVID-19 related adjustments to programming and other activities not captured elsewhere on the form. If you cannot provide accurate count for numerical progress report fields, because project partners do not have access to files, for example, you should leave those fields blank rather than providing estimates. As a best practice, you want to communicate all setbacks and successes through the use of progress reports, as well as with your program specialist. So, how do you report on activities now that they've been shifted to online remote platforms, and when you've not been collecting the detailed data on individuals served like you did in face-to-face sessions? The short answer here is to do the best you can and make very good use of those narrative fields. I'd like to pass the microphone to Muniba now, who will discuss the various resources at your disposal and where to go for assistance. Muniba?
Thank you, Rebecca. Now we will briefly go over resources and where grant award administrators can find additional assistance. The PMC Helpdesk is available to help you with any questions you may have about responding to the progress reporting questions or performance measures. You can contact us by calling the number on the screen or emailing ojjdp@ojp.usdoj.gov. For a faster response, we encourage grant award administrators to send us an email. The OJJDP PMC Helpdesk contact information is available on the screen. Our office hours are Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, except for U.S. federal holidays. The PMC Helpdesk returns emails and phone calls within 24 hours, so please don't hesitate to leave a voicemail or email even after business hours. JustGrants support. If you have questions about the JustGrants system, for example, accessing the system, please call the number on the screen between the hours of 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern Time and Saturday, Sunday, and federal holidays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. If you experience any issues with JustGrants, we strongly encourage grant award administrators to reach out to JustGrants support. JustGrants information, such as instructions on locating, completing, and submitting performance reports in JustGrants, can be found on the ojjdp.ojp.gov website or by viewing the video available on the screen. You can also log into JustGrants at justgrants.usdoj.gov. Thanks. Now back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Muniba. Let's take a moment now and reflect on what was just presented. First, we discussed each of the program-specific Prison Rape Elimination Act program performance measures, noting specific instances where data would need to be collected and the type of data needed. Next, we discussed best practices for planning, collecting, tracking, and reporting on data. An important takeaway is the fact that OJJDP understands that data collection has begun and organizations, agencies, and subawards need time to review, process, and create a data collection plan for these performance measures. Some indicators will be easier to collect than others. We encourage you to work with your partners and TTA providers on a data collection plan. So, what's next? Next steps include the opportunity we all have to collect data that will inform change down the road. For our part, those changes come in the form of edited performance measures. You will be receiving a fillable feedback form that you are requested to complete and return to the PMT Helpdesk once you have familiarized yourself with the newly updated performance measures. There is one form per performance measure with plenty of room for narrative. Providing us with feedback gives us the information we need to fully understand your needs or those challenges that you may face implementing that particular measure. Collecting your feedback now on the newly revised performance measures informs the refresh cycle after the pilot has occurred and we have identified changes. For now, however, no planned changes to the performance measures are being considered, and we would request that you do not make any changes to any of the documents posted online or provided in the training sessions. And that concludes today's session.